So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to see all of you here today. And I want to give a huge thank you to our sponsors, Comcast and WorkHuman, for making this possible. I want to give a quick note that today's session is being recorded and it will be available on YouTube for the cohort afterwards. So if you have team members who are missing that you want to make sure are able to catch up on the material, that's the way to do that. I also do want to put it on your radar that in the fall, we will not be recording sessions anymore because that will be so incredibly interactive. So just want to put it on your radar that those will really need to be joined live. And then I also wanted to set a few Zoom norms because the last couple sessions we've had together have been primarily ones that we've had with the public available too. So I just kind of wanted to have a moment to chat about this. So please do change your name to include your company name so we can all get to know each other. You can do that by clicking the ... in the upper right-hand corner of your video and then clicking rename, and that basically simulates a name tag of like what we would have had for you if we were in person. Please do stay on video the whole time if you are able to. I know some of you have bandwidth issues or might be, juggling childcare. So if you're not able to, that's okay, but please do turn on your video if you are. It just helps us to all feel a little bit more present and a little bit more together. And then please keep yourself on mute unless you're asking a question. And for questions, please submit them throughout the whole session via the chat, or if you want to wait till the Q&A, you can click the participants raise hand function, and then we'll call on you and you can ask your question verbally. So I'm really excited about today's session. I've been thinking a little bit about where we've been as a cohort. So we started out together in person with our orientation in February, and then the world completely changed and we adjusted. This whole session is all about entrepreneurial thought and action. So we had the chance to practice a little bit of entrepreneurial action by totally readjusting the way that we were delivering this and becoming a virtual program. We had 2 webinars, one on resilience and scenario planning and one on gender acumen and inclusion. Then we had the chance to come together and synthesize what some of those lessons learned from those 2 sessions were. And then today we are talking to Christina Luconi, who is actually an alum from last year, to talk a little bit about her experience with the program. After today, where we're going is we're going to be starting to have some sessions around design thinking, entrepreneurial thought and action, and culture that will support you in actually designing and implementing your pilot program at your organization. And our hope with that is that that helps to increase inclusivity at your organization, and that creates a cascade that actually makes Greater Boston the best place for women to work. So it's a lofty mission, and we're glad to have you as partners in achieving that mission. Today's session is a change in action session, and I'm really excited about it. Last year, we heard amazing feedback about the change in action sessions, that people felt like they were able to take ideas that they had heard at the session and directly apply them to their pilot program. And we're really lucky to have Christina Luconi here to talk about it today because she was in your exact shoes a year ago. She did All in for Advancement 2019. And so she has had the experience that you're having of trying to figure out and then implement something at her organization. And in addition to being an alum, Christina is also the Chief People Officer at Rapid7 and really an equity leader in her field. So I feel really lucky to have her. I have some questions for her that I'm going to ask, but then I'm going to leave at least 30 minutes at the end for your questions. So please do be thinking about your questions, and you can send them in the chat throughout or by raising your hand at the end. So that's it for introductions from me. And now, Christina, I have so many questions for you. I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you for joining us. So Christina, can you tell us a little bit about your involvement with women's equity initiatives prior to the program?
I'm going to be really candid and tell you I had not spent a ton of time thinking about it, which is going to sound really weird, right? Like as an old woman in tech, my whole career has been in tech. And my first job out of school was in this very forward-thinking consulting firm that, even though the CEO of it was a man, there was very diverse partnership among men and women within the firm. Lots of women at all levels of the company. It never occurred to me that it should be difficult for a woman to be successful in business because my first entree into business was very equitable. And as my career has been very much kind of a one-trick pony in that, I've tried to do human resources a little bit differently. I'm much more focused on the culture side of things. I started focusing on it before culture was really a thing.
Mm.
But sort of went in and realized I was trying to create environments for companies to scale, going into startups, usually the first people person in the startup, and building the kind of environment where everybody, regardless of who you were, could thrive. It wasn't until I started talking to other friends and women colleagues outside of the organizations I work for that I realized, wow, women are really having a problem out there. Like, I feel incredibly grateful to work with men who don't seem to, they just want you to do really good work. They don't really care who you are. But also gave me the space to create environments that were really meant to have a level playing field for everybody regardless. So I hadn't really thought a ton about it. Zoom ahead to 2018, I guess it was, and our CEO of Rapid7, who happens to be an African-American man, and this sounds like the start to a bad joke, like black guy and, old white woman sitting and having a drink. And we said diversity and inclusion is becoming a really big topic. Is it something we should be thinking about? We're kind of looking at each other and we're like, we got a pretty diverse team. Like, are we really, do we want to do this to jump on the bandwagon, or is it something that we really should be focused on? And what we came to really quickly was our company is growing so quickly that to continue to be innovative, we're going to need to have a diversity of thought. And diversity of thought typically comes packaged in a lot of different ways. That became the business case for us to say, this is really important that we become much more thoughtful and proactive and intentional about our efforts, not just for women, but for people of color, for making sure that we had the most inclusive environment ever. So it went from just a notion of, this is just the right thing to do my whole career, to a very big intentionality over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing that it started at the top, in your case, knowing that you had that support. And I'm wondering, like, how did you and your team go about kind of converting that idea that you are really invested in diversity and inclusion into an actual project idea? Where did you start?
At Rapid7, you're saying, like just a couple of years ago? I think everything kind of came together in a perfect storm moment where, Corey and I had said, this is where we think we want to go. I think you approached us, Caitlin approached us and said, hey, we have this great new program. Are you interested? And I was really interested for a couple of reasons. Number one, it allowed us to do things that were not with just my team. I was driving this. I'm, for all intents and purposes, the head of diversity and inclusion at Rapid7. But I wanted other people to be involved. I believe to make change within an organization, it can't just be from the top. You have to truly involve other people along the way. And if you're not getting them involved, getting them to roll up their hands and take some accountability to drive the change, its likelihood of truly working are much more slim. So it gave me the opportunity to bring on two colleagues that had a vested interest in wanting to see diversity, two men, who wanted to really see us make a difference in the company. And it was very project-based, which is like, like anything, if you get so busy at work, you can have the best intentions, but trying to get all our schedules to match up and stuff could have given us excuses not to drive it. And this became, hey, we're committed. We are paying some money for this. We have to show up and present. We have to be present. So it gave us a forcing function to really, in a very quick time frame, turn some stuff around.
I feel like something I've heard from a lot of teams too is that they thought their project would look one way, but then once they got started, end up looking another way. So can you talk a little bit about your process, if that was true for you or not, and how you kind of gathered the information that helped you focus in?
It was. I mean, so our project was focused on women in sales. One of the things that we had seen in our company is that we had grown so much, and our sales force had always been pretty diverse. We hire people in very entry level into like a business development rep and kind of move them up pretty quickly. But what we were seeing was that women, even though they were some of our best sellers and had been like crushing their numbers and, were like 40% of the people going to President's Club and things like that, they were all starting to leave the company right before they'd get to a manager level. And what we started thinking was, as we were sort of trying to outline our project, was we want to figure out what is going on with the women that's making them lead sales or leaving our company at this point in their career when they're really starting to do well. And we thought this was, is it because they're starting to get married and contemplate family, and sales is a tough career? Like, what was it? So we had some hypotheses about why this might be happening. And we tried to structure our project around that. But as I said a few minutes ago, the whole approach to making progress here wasn't just the three of us leading the project. It was engaging as many people as we could from our sales org. We started with the women and very quickly broadened out to males as well. And what we found was that the women might be leaving because, in fact, they were saying, hey, I'm starting to get pregnant. I don't know if I want to work like this. There's not a lot of flexibility for me. I don't want to feel guilty if I'm walking out the door to pick up a child at childcare. But what we were also seeing by talking to the men is this isn't just a woman's issue. The women are the ones leaving, but the men are so stressed out because they feel the pressure to be on the phone still. We have a largely inside team. They're younger, single people that they're sitting with don't have those same time constraints, maybe doing a little more FaceTime. And, we're sitting there going, oh my God, we had no idea that people were feeling this way because so much of the.
I think you froze. Did she freeze for others too? Or
yes, she has frozen for me too, Allison.
Okay. Well, we'll just give her a minute or two to come back. But while we're waiting for her to return, something that did really resonate with me that she just said was how oftentimes issues of inclusion actually don't just impact the group that we think is impacted. And I recently helped to run an event with Dr. Atia Martin, and she said something that I really loved, which is that it's more like a canary in the coal mine situation, that because different groups are differentially impacted by issues of inclusivity or really exclusivity, that often they are the ones who are impacted first and the most. And so that's where it shows up more obviously, but it actually impacts everybody. And so when we approach issues of diversity or equity or inclusion in a mindset of like we are like helping or working or serving one group, that's actually kind of taking a narrow approach to what we're really doing, because in actuality, the work that we do will benefit everybody. It's just that this group that might have less power or less privilege is impacted first and most. And so it shows up most obviously there. So I thought that was really, it was really resonant for me hearing Christina say that that was her experience with her project as well, that when they started to interview women, they realized that, it was showing up most obviously for them because they were the ones leaving in large numbers, but that actually was impacting everybody. And I think that is really a powerful lesson for us as we're thinking about our own projects and our own equity work in general. I see that Christina has fallen off in general, but I'm wondering if maybe we can use this time while we're waiting for her to reconnect to kind of check in and see, are there any questions that have come up so far that actually maybe we can answer? So maybe now that we're talking about this project, maybe it's kind of pinging for you this idea of like, oh yeah, there's a project just coming up. I should be thinking about that. So are there any questions that you have that Susan and Caitlin and I can answer for you while we wait for Christina to reconnect?
And I think folks should feel free to type a message into the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and unmute yourself.
Thanks.
I just want to draw attention to what you put into the chat, Caitlin, because I thought when Christina mentioned it, it was an important point. You don't always get a chance to kind of focus on a project like this. And when you join a program, kind of an external program, it does give you that reason to make it a higher priority, to stay on track. And this whole idea of this program being an accountability partner, either for a new project or an existing project, it's useful for us because we're all so busy. It's helpful to have a reason to make something stick out in terms of its priority. So we tell people that a lot when we do executive ed programs, that's one of the side benefits. You have not an excuse, but a reason to do something important.
I see a cell phone just joined us. I'm going to unmute. Christina, is that you?
This is Katie. I I don't think I meant to unmute myself, but
No, I didn't.
I'll ask anyway. Oh, okay.
It's not your fault. I did. I saw the cell phone join, and my fingers are crossed that Christina had joined us on her cell phone.
No, it's me. I can't use my computer. But anyway, something I wanted to ask is like how, like, not like tips or tricks, but best practices to really help you narrow down kind of the direction you want to take. I think, like, you know, there's so much out there, and there's a lot that resonates with us. So how do you really, you know, narrow down or identify like what I want to focus on? I'm not asking you to give me an idea, but just, you know, something like that.
Oh, absolutely. And you're not alone in having that question. There'll be a session later on, and Susan, I'll hand things off to you to talk about this more, but where the Babson faculty will really give you like structure for kind of figuring out where some of the areas of greatest need are. And you'll start by doing some interviews and by doing some observation, because I think, you know, something that Christina said that is so great and really a pattern we saw last year is that oftentimes like we think we know what needs fixing, and then oftentimes once we actually start to have the conversation and dig in a little bit deeper, we discover that maybe we are not fully right, or maybe we're not right at all, and what really needs to happen is something different. And so there'll be structure to help you kind of figure that piece out. And then we would also recommend that you kind of check back in with your senior leaders, the ones who kind of like supported and sponsored this participation, to kind of make sure that where you're headed is kind of in alignment with some of their priorities as well. Anything that you'd add, Susan?
So sorry about that.
Welcome back.
Yeah, my network just decided to completely crap out, as you know, we're learning how to improvise these days.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to add one thing to this answer, and then we're going to shift it right back over to you, Christina. Mm-hmm. I think one thing that we know we will ask everyone to do is to take a nice, solid assessment of what you're already doing, right? And that sometimes, believe it or not, will just open gaps up for you that make it very clear where there could be a really interesting need. You don't have to start something, as we had said, you could build on something that's already started. But I think another frame of mind is to consider that starting anywhere, which is the way we think about it at Babson, starting anywhere actually is fine. Because in a phenomenon of inclusion, any place in the system is a good starting point, because there are needs. And as you had pointed out, Allison, we will find how that can then cascade into other areas of groups that might be impacted and benefit from whatever we start. So I wouldn't lose sleep over it, is my final answer.
It's a good final answer. Yes, final answer is that we've got your back.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that I will transition this back to Christina by actually asking you the question that Katie just asked us. So Katie was asking the question of like, how do you figure out where to start? It feels like there's all of these needs that are all kind of shouting for attention, and that it would be really valuable for us to spend time in any one of like a dozen places. So how did your team approach narrowing in and choosing one focus for your pilot project?
Sure. I think we're pretty dialed in our company, and had a pretty good temperature check of where things were going well and where they weren't. But we focused on a couple of things. One was, where do we have data that would lead us to believe if we could make impact here, it would be pretty significant? And we were seeing like our turnover is relatively low as a company in general, but it was much higher in that sales population. So that was one piece of data. The other was knowing what we wanted to try to do. We actually believed we could move the dial really quickly in that space. Like there's some other projects that we could have done that I don't think we actually could have started, finished, rolled out, and made impact in the period of time in which the project lasted. And we wanted to come out of this not just starting something, but actually delivering and seeing impact by the time we were done. So we sort of narrowed down on those couple of characteristics.
I think those are great criteria to consider. Like, what do you already know? Like, where is the need high, and what scope is appropriate for the time that you have? I think those are great criteria. And so you told us a little bit about the need that you identified. And so can you tell us a little bit about what your working process was like? Like, we know that everyone's really busy, and you said that before time had been a limiting factor in how much you had gotten done. So how did you and your team approach
Sure.
like, working together and moving the project along?
Sure. The good thing was, we also tried to pick people that we knew each other, not to say that, meeting new people wouldn't have been a great thing, but because we all knew each other, not particularly well, but we had some relationship, there was already a bit of a trust formed, which was great. So it was like, okay, we all kind of leaned in and said, this is what we want to try to accomplish together. I knew that we were all, super motivated. We had a lot of goals and value sets in common, which helped as a framework. I think we also agreed, if we're going to do this, I love the title of this is All In for Advancement, because we sort of latched on to the language of all in. Like, if we're going to do this, we're going all in. Like, we're all busy. No one's skipping meetings. We appreciate that we all have stuff going on in the background, but we're going to make the time to make sure that we never left the room when we were together at the chamber without saying, what's our next step? What's the homework? Who's on point for it? So just those little things kept us focused. And I'm not going to suggest we spent tons of meetings together in between. We divided and conquered a lot. We completely used Slack for everything because we were all on like different floors. We didn't see each other every day. But, if one of us was responsible for brainstorming questions we were going to ask in focus groups, or another person would take the lead on leading the focus groups, another person would take the themes and say, this is what I'm hearing from your notes. Am I right? And then we would just constantly be in touch with each other, throughout the downtime to make sure that we were staying on the same page. So we really tried to optimize the teaming that way.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that you used your time together to form the plan, but then you optimized your like individual time outside of that. And then my ears kind of perked up at the word focus group. So tell me a little bit more about like how you collected the information that you used.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, now I'm going to say it for the third time, I think, but I think it was really critical to the success of our project and just in general with how we do anything at the company. There's always a group of people that could have like 85% of the right answer, right? Or they have a hypothesis, they could go drive it. I am really a firm believer of 1 + 1 = 3. Like, when you get more information, more voices into the conversation, even something great is going to turn out to be, I believe, like much more chance of phenomenal if you're involving diversity of thought into that. And we thought, okay, we have some data. We want to start to test out some of our theories on people. We picked focus groups. We were really thoughtful about, we started with just women, then we broadened it out to include men too. We tried to pick diverse groups of people so that it wasn't just, all women at this point of their sales career. We tried to pick people that were at different ages, different periods in their sales evolution, some moms, some non-moms, some people that were really successful, some people that were really struggling. So we didn't talk to every person. There's probably 300 people within the entire go-to-market group, but we picked we probably talked to 50, 60 people that were pretty well representative of what we thought we were going after here. And then we went in with a bunch of questions and said, poke holes in it. Like, safe environment, there's nothing that will be said outside of this room that your name will ever be attached to. We're going to ask to create a safe space, let it rip. And as soon as we did that, man, people just like the floodgates started. The good news is we were doing a lot of stuff well, but they honed in pretty quickly on, but what would be amazing, what would keep me here forever would be X. And it was great. It was a really great approach for us, and being able to take the notes. I think we each ran 2 or 3 focus groups apiece, and we all got same themes. It didn't matter. I was one woman. We had 2 other guys leading the conversations. Who led the conversation didn't seem to make any difference in the output of the information that we got. We consolidated our notes and picked a couple of key themes to really hone in on and move forward within our project.
I love that. And I love that you set some kind of ground rules at the beginning of saying that this was a safe space that seemed like it really worked, and like people felt like they were able really candid feedback. And another thing I want to ask you about was about senior leadership buy-in. So that's something, that was a theme that came up last year, was that some groups seem to have an easier time than others in actually getting that buy-in. Your team really benefited from you being a senior leader who is actually on their team. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience getting senior leader buy-in from the times you've needed to get it and the times when people have approached you to actually get it from you?
Sure. Yeah, we were definitely in a unique situation, I think, in our cohort, because I think I probably was the only senior leader as part of a group. But I don't think of myself that way. I'm like a team member. But I take it for granted, the fact that I could actually go back to the office and drive some of this stuff, right? If I think it's a good idea, it's my job to go make it happen. So I realized that we were absolutely at an advantage for that. And it also made me acutely aware of the struggles that other companies were facing, because, you know, you'd have this incredibly motivated, well-intentioned group of people, and we would, I'm sure I don't know how you're doing it now, because we used to sit around the tables and shuffle the tables, and you'd be working with different groups. Super beneficial to learn about how other companies were doing things. So I loved that piece of it. But I was always struck by some of the struggles that those teams were facing, because they were in much larger organizations. Somebody had signed them up to participate because they thought it would be a really good idea. But then you say, okay, you've got all this great stuff happening. Who's championing? Like, who are you going back and selling this to? And they didn't have someone. Or they would say, this person is responsible, but they've given us 3 minutes of time since this whole thing started. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, who signs up for, like, what company would sign up for this and like check the box, yes, we think this is important, and then not truly champion it. And again, I live in this very like Pollyanna-ish world of like, oh, if you think it should be better, go make it better. Because that's been my only experience. But it made me very acutely aware that other companies truly are facing some pretty significant challenges. So I think to answer your question directly, I think senior leadership, some form of champion, it doesn't have to be the CEO, it doesn't have to be the chief people officer, but somebody who can influence and help support what your efforts are, is really, really valuable. Candidly, I don't know how you drive anything in an organization with true change that's got to really be lived and embodied by everyone if you don't have some of that starting at the top.
Completely agree. And this year on the application, we did ask for each organization to kind of identify some people that should be informed along the way. So all of you got your expressions of interest at the beginning, but if you need any help finding it, just let me know. I'm happy to send it to you again. So that is at least a preliminary list of folks that you can reach out to. And you may find in your process that there are others you'd like to bring in as well. But we did learn from last year, and we did try to set up some champions for you. And, you know, Christina, from your perspective as like being a senior leader, you probably get a lot of requests for support. And so what stands out to you when when a group of people kind of approach you and ask you for your help? Like, what do you look for when you decide whether to say yes or no to a proposal?
Funny you should ask, because we were actually just talking about that this morning. I think I look for impact to the organization. You know, we've sort of shifted to a world where I don't know if it's high tech. I don't know if it's because I work with a lot of super young people, but it's very much me focused, not intentionally me focused, but it's very me focused. And, you know, I want to feel good. I want to focus on diversity and inclusion because I want to. And what I really look for is projects or ideas that are about, hey, this is going to benefit our customer or our company. And then ultimately, how do we put a switch on it so that it's making a great experience for the employee as well? So you're thinking about it all, but you're starting with what's the impact to we still have a business to run. So what's going to impact the business, and then turn that into a really exceptional experience for the company. So as a human being, I think diversity and inclusion, for example, or opportunity for women is just incredibly important, but that would be incredibly self-serving, like, hey, I'm just here to make it better for women. I want to make it better for women because I think we have a lot of customers that are women that want to see other, you know, whatever. I mean, I look at the bigger picture and then work backwards to make sure that it creates a good experience for our people. So I look for people to come up with ideas that are just much like have pretty significant impact to the company first.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a good tip to think about like how to pitch it in the language of like business results, because that's likely to be the language that a senior leader is like excited about and ready to kind of shift around some of their other priorities to make happen. And I think another thing that I wanted to talk to you about is, you know, from your position as a chief people officer, you have this really amazing bird's eye view of the sector. And something that's come up in this group quite a bit is interest in intersectionality and organizations increasingly focused on anti-Black racism and inequity as a result of the kind of refocus on the movement for Black lives. So I'm wondering from your perspective, like what are some trends that you are anticipating and some ways that this group can start thinking about how to approach a more intersectional project if that's where the interest is of their organization?
That's a fantastic question. I do not know that I have a fantastic answer. I will tell you one thing that I have really learned over the last several months. Just for context, when Corey and I had that conversation 2 years ago and we decided we were really going to kind of lean into diversity and inclusion more, we put a very bold stake in the ground and we said we want to be 50-50 by the end of 2020. And what that meant to us, and this is going to sound probably a little odd, but cybersecurity, the industry that we're in, is incredibly white male dominated. So we thought if we group together women and people of color, and I know that's not a normal thing to do, but if we group them together just for a period of time to move the dial and try to balance it out, if we could be 50% women, people of color, 50% majority white male, we will have really sort of started to shift. And then we can separate and really focus on sort of wave 2, which we're about to start now. But that became really, putting a bold stake in the ground was really, really important. So I feel really grateful that we at least had some kind of framework and some kind of goals set up before everything just kind of re-imploded over the last few months. But one of the things that's been really interesting is that watching companies scramble now to try to figure out how they want to get on board with this. And I believe that most of them are incredibly well-intentioned. But I think there's a lot of, I don't know a nice way to say this, so I apologize. Like there's a lot of bullshit going on, right? I don't want to see another company hang up, you know, Black Lives Matter with a fist and then do nothing. They have nothing to back it up whatsoever. Again, I'm not going to like say they don't care. I'm sure they do, but it's just it's just bullshit. And I think, I apologize for the language, but I think it's really, really important that if you're going to truly put yourself out there and say, we care, no one's expecting any company to be perfect right now, right? No, I don't know one company that can look themselves in the mirror and go, nailed it. Like diversity and inclusion, we are like, no one's nailed it and no one's ever gonna nail it because it's a work in progress. I think the best we can help to do is quarter by quarter, every quarter going forward, every company gets a little bit better. It becomes a little more diverse, a little more inclusive. And someday maybe we won't be having programs where we have to rise women up or call it out or focus on people of color. We've reached true inclusion. We're a really far way away from that. But I think the first piece is knowing who you are, take a good hard look in the mirror, understand where you're starting from, what strengths do you have, where are your challenge areas, and own them. And then prioritize and figure out this is where we're going to start. We can't be all things to all people. We can't do everything right now. But these are the top 3 things we're going to do over the course of the next quarter, 6 months. Hold us accountable to those. And when we get progress on those, we'll take the next step forward. I think companies that are being very intentional and not trying to like boil the ocean right now, but really these are the measurable things you can see us make a difference, are the ones that are actually going to truly make some positive change.
That's a great point too. And I really want to thank you for your candor on that. And I want to ask the question too, like when these groups are starting to think about what they want to do at their organization, what advice do you have for them in trying to suss out the true appetite for change at their organization and to see who's truly committed and where there might be a little bit of what you call bullshit instead,
Sure,
you know?
Sure. I have always found it, identify who your cultural icons are. If you will. And that doesn't mean, the senior people or, I really feel horrible for people of color right now because everyone's like, oh, go talk to Bob. Bob, the African-American guy in accounting is like, and he gets asked every single question. Well, everybody's different. There's not like one size fits all. Maybe Bob's opinion is great on one thing, but it's not super relevant to everybody else in another thing. I think you just have to figure out a diverse group of voices within your company that are very well respected and tuned in. They're not just playing for their own agenda, but they're really sort of sharing honestly about what's going on. They have a measured approach in terms of, hey, we do these things pretty well, but man, we got to fix this. This is really bad. And they'll call you out on it. And if you can identify who those populations of people are, those are typically my go-to people to say, where do we start? This is, again, safe place. Here's my thoughts. Here's my approach. Rip it apart. And then let's work together to make the change. And that I found has been the easiest way to get a really good finger on your pulse. It doesn't, like at the morale surveys that you run once a year, and then it takes you 6 months to get through the day. Like, you know what? You could figure out the pulse check on your company in 24 hours if you pick the right group of people and say, tell me what you think is going on. Give me your insights. And then prioritize. Take the information. You're going to get a list of themes. Again, you can't do it all at once, but figure out what can we do together with the resources that we have, especially in today's world. None of us are together. We're working remotely. We have all kinds of crazy challenges going on, but what can we do that we really believe if we work on X project, we will feel the difference at the end of the year?
I love that. And I've heard a couple people say that the way that they identify their cultural icons, which I love that term, Christina, at their organizations, is they think about like, who would the meeting be canceled for? So if you have like a 10-person meeting, but there's one person who can't make it, who is that person that the other 9 people kind of look at each other and they're like, nah, let's just wait till next time.
Yeah,
like, then that is the cultural icon. And then also I think another one I think about sometimes is like, whose like vacation time is like really emotionally felt. So it's like whose vacation time is like when they're out of the office for a week, you just see people kind of like look at their door sadly as they walk by because they're really wanting to know what they would think about a project or maybe get some personal and professional advice. Like they're kind of the markers that I think about when I think about who to identify. Is there anything else you'd want to add to that list?
Yeah, the other thing I would add to it is if you identify, like those cultural icons really stand out at every company, right? And it's, maybe 10% of the population. I have found that you can like double your impact by focusing on people's development and careers. If you ask the cultural icons to say, who should we include in this conversation that I might not know about? Who's an up and comer in your mind? Who's your cultural icon that, maybe is newer or more junior, and bring them into the conversation? Because oftentimes those cultural icons, if you will, get tapped on for everything. They're well known, they're influencers, they're people that get tapped all the time. And if you ask them to involve other people or other voices, or at least identify, you've broadened the group. And typically those people that you maybe not know of yet, or because they're newer, they're more junior, whatever, are so keen to participate that all they need is the project or the opportunity to share, and then you've got your whole new crop of icons, sort of waiting in the wings. So I found that to be super helpful as well.
I love that. So, I want to talk to you forever, and I have 1,000 questions for you, but I'm going to only ask one more and then open it up to the group. So everyone, if you can start submitting your questions either through the chat, or you can raise your hand by clicking on participants, raise hand, and I'll call on you. And this will be the last question that I ask you, Christina, before I start asking their questions instead. And the question I want to ask is, what are some specific activities or workshops or something that you have done that you've really loved that this group could consider just kind of copying and pasting over at their organization?
I don't even remember what the exercises were called, but pretty much everything Susan Duffy led, we adopted and like stole when we went back. So you did a brilliant job, Susan, in sort of helping us. But I can't remember exactly what the exercises were, but there was one where we had this like giant sheet of paper and we had to, capture all these ideas and we had things sectioned off again. I mean, this was like a year ago. I can't even remember what I had for dinner last night. So I apologize. It's not a function of not being great exercise. Literally can't remember what it was, but it really forced us to be creative, test the boundaries on different ideas and not stop at like 3 ideas. Let's throw everything out there. No idea is a bad idea. Of course, 85% of our ideas were completely stupid, but those 15% were awesome and we could really tease out and get more from it. And that was such a great, again, like the safe space concept is fantastic. If you're just sort of saying, let's just brainstorm, let's throw out crazy ideas out there, that's a fun camaraderie way to just, build a relationship while you're doing something, because just get as creative as you want to. And I think taking the boundaries off of things and just saying, let's not focus on what we think we can do right now. In a perfect world, if we look at, the end of the day, somebody said, oh my God, what an amazing job this team did, in this period of time. And they really hit it out of the park. What would that look and feel like? And starting with the end in mind and then working backwards was super valuable to us. So I think those types of things were really helpful.
That's great. Thank you. I think this sets us up well to be thinking about the exercises we do together as not just ones for us to do, but also ones to possibly teach too, which might mean we're kind of paying attention to them in maybe a little bit of a different way, knowing that. So thank you for setting us up for that. So now this is your space. We know that, creating change, influencing culture, it can feel overwhelming, but we also know that you were chosen for a reason and we know that you can do it. So we want to provide this space for you to ask your questions. So go ahead and type in the chat or go to participants raise hand to be called on. Ryan, go ahead and unmute, and then Mark, you'll be next.
Sure. How about some surprises that you found coming out of your project, both surprise successes or any surprise failures? Was there anything that your team was like shocked by?
The differences between, we were focused on sales. We had a lot of different sales pods, if you will. So, and we were very surprised by the difference in manager and the effect that had on people, on their team. So for example, everyone's always heard that, I'm not going to get it right, but you don't quit the company, you quit your boss, you quit your manager. We found that to be so true. So the managers that tended, whether they were male or female, if they were more open-minded in terms of flexibility, or if they had a family, or if they had other things in their life other than just work, they tended to create an environment where people were thriving and could picture themselves in there for the long haul. If I work for, I might work for a man, but as a woman who's about to have a baby, this manager has 2 small children of his own. He totally gets it. If his wife gets called in, he's on baby duty. Like he understands and he empathizes. That made a world of difference to I work for a young man who, can't even get a date, let alone have a family to think about. And now I'm trying to think about, how do I tell him I need to go pick up my child at daycare? And we found, I'm using generalizations, but we found those managers to create environments that were way more in the box, way less flexibility, and we're having more turnover. And I think we had never really dove in that hard and really understood what was going on there. So it's not that, I'm sure some of you will be happy to hear, it's not that white men were bad, but it was the person and how they were engaging and managing that was the huge factor in how this was being received by the employees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I remember I read this McKinsey study that really influenced me, which is that They found that men and women actually on average take off about the same amount of time for work for childcare, but men don't announce it. They just leave. They just leave when they need to do childcare, and women like to check in with their manager first to communicate it. And so I think that was an interesting moment for me, and it aligns with what you're saying, Christina, too, about like whether you have the empathy and the shared experience, but it also is about like how we label things and the assumptions we make. So when people saw that women were talking about it more, they thought they were therefore doing it more and therefore doing work less, but actually men were doing it at about the same rate. But when they just picked up and left, everyone made the implicit assumption that they were leaving to do work. They were like, oh, they're going to a business meeting, even if they were going to like coach their kids' soccer team, which I thought was really interesting. Okay, Mark,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I'm gonna turn my camera off because it says I'm unstable again.
Okay.
At least I might be unstable, but apparently my network is. So I'm gonna just go off for a minute so we can still talk. I do think it's interesting that we learned from talking to some of our people that women had a confidence issue too. Even though you were in sales, and even though you might be absolutely crushing your number as a woman, there was still this fear about, I will be judged if I leave early, or I will be judged if, whereas men, we did uncover that men felt somewhat the same. They felt a little guilty leaving to go pick up a child or whatever, but they didn't show that fear. They felt, like they would walk out, they're going to do it anyway. They have to go pick up their kid. So they're not going to make a bunch of excuses for it. They're just going to walk out confidently and say, this is what I got to do. That confidence thing has been something that I've really been focusing on for all the women in our company. I think that's the key to so much. No one, at the end of the day, no one's really judging you as much as you're probably judging yourself.
Mark, go ahead.
So I've got a question, and Christina, it's not directly for you maybe, but sort of about the spirit of this work, I guess. And if it's, I'm sure I'll fumble the words, and I'm sure it won't be politically correct. So everybody go easy on me. But I know that the point of this exercise, not the exercise, but the point of this work is to create cultural change and to create change at scale. But as I'm thinking through potential ideas, and this is coming up on, I've been made aware of the fact that we have pretty terrible maternity leave benefits, right? And so, like, if I was going to go try to, that in and of itself is a dollar commitment, a material dollar commitment, and would take a lot of support to go get that. So I'm not sure that there would be huge cultural change from being able to have it come up to market standards. But it might do a lot of good and be helpful in some, like, is that even something as simple as that? Is that big enough or smart enough that it could actually create change beyond the one small thing?
I absolutely think so. I mean, we looked at that, and this is super politically incorrect, but I'm going to share it anyway because it was our reality, which is, I think people lean heavily on saying, hey, if we move from 8 weeks to 12 weeks or whatever, pick your numbers, it's going to cost us significantly. We did, people that are way better at math than I did some number crunching, and you know what? Losing those women is going to be really expensive,
right?
Because they're going to go to a different company that creates a better policy. And realistically, we didn't have so many women in sales that were probably going to go, like, in the company. If you look at your population of men to women, and you figure out what population are women, make that a little bit larger number, because hopefully you'll make some progress and you'll get more. How many of them are of child rearing years, and what percentage of them will likely go out on maternity leave? The number's not as big as you think it is in terms of the money spent.
Right.
And the goodwill that creates. Women will join your company, you'll find, because you have a better maternity policy. You might be able to attract better candidates than you would have, 20 years ago. We weren't thinking about that stuff, but now women look at that stuff. They look at what's the maternity leave. And quite frankly, so are men starting to look at that now for paternity leave. So I think the numbers actually, it's not as heavy a lift as you think it is, because, it's not like 80% of your company is going to go out on a 12-week.
Yeah, at the same time, yeah.
So I found that to be an incredibly impactful thing.
Helpful.
I
Thank you
just
very
want
much.
to add one point to what Christina said, and that is to offer the data that when women leave and the assumption is they go home to raise babies, they do not. They go to work for your competitor.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And we have lots of studies that show that.
That would be awesome. We could leverage some of that data. Yeah.
I will say this too. It's not just about, like, this is what I mean by intentionality, because I think you could create an amazing maternity policy, but if you make it really hard for women to come back, okay, they just took you gave them 3 or 4 months of paid time, which is amazing, but then they have no place to nurse or to pump, or you roll your eyes every time they say they've got to, do X. I have found, this is not substantiated data, I'm sure Susan has tons of research that she could share. The women in our company that have come back from maternity leave are so much more productive than the average person, because they have to work so hard to get so much done in a confined period of time. They're going to go there, they stop making the Starbucks runs during the day, they put their heads down, they crush their work, and they get done what they got to get done. They're the most productive people in the company. I might be totally off on that, but that is my my observation.
I'd buy it. I'm buying it.
Well, anecdotally, what I understand is that they do more before they arrive at 8 o'clock or 8:30 in the morning than most of us have done by noon, right?
Yeah.
So and when they get there, they also continue to hit the ground running because they don't have time to spare.
They also don't want it to ever be an excuse. Nobody ever wants to say you couldn't do it. I think we all got something to prove. Every working mother feels like they have something to prove, at least for the first couple of years.
I also want to address the part, Mark, where you asked if this too small, and to just emphatically say no, because I think like what you've probably already heard from the enthusiastic response just from us is that I think employees look to these markers like policies or programs or numbers to see, like, are we safe here? And is this a place I can be long term? And so even if I, for example, am like not planning on having children anytime soon, I'm still going to pay attention to like whether I could have children here. And if I am feeling like the answer is no, then I'm probably leaving the organization even well before I ever want to get pregnant, because I'm like, this isn't the place I can do this here. And so I think that it has a huge cascade effect, even if it's not on the individuals who want to take it. And so we do have a couple more questions. So I'm going to go in this order. Lisa, you're going to be next, and then it's going to be Peter and then Shannon. So Lisa, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey there. So great dialogue. I think I'm getting a lot of my answers from my hand raise anyway. So I am starting maternity leave at the end of August. My wife is due, so we'll both be out. And I looked at the, great company, but we have a great maternity leave and all that stuff. But I am squeezing everything for those 3 months into the before and after. And I'm at a point where I'm starting to get through it and a little vulnerable right now, but what am I going to be like when I return? And what can I do to make sure that it's not a pause in my career when I really want to spend this time enjoying my family? And that's hard. That's hard to know that the last 12 years at Comcast, I've been pedal to the metal, really going. And I don't want to skip a beat or feel like I'm missing out on something. So almost what do I do to kind of prepare for the before and the after to feel like I haven't missed anything and I'm still that person that wants to go strong with my career. And then also, how do I not feel that guilt when I say, oh, I have to leave because my child's sick and I have to go pick them up from daycare or whatever. As much of a planner I am, there's still this fear and this guilt that goes into, but I also want to support my company, but my family comes first.
Lisa, I feel like we should go have a glass of wine and have this conversation, because
okay.
I'm going to be really honest with you as a mom. Like, there's no way there's anything any of us could say to you that will prepare you for what you're about to go through, right? I think there's no way things aren't going to change. There's no way that you're not going to go back to work and feel slightly differently. And it doesn't mean that you take your foot off the pedal. you might just shift into a different gear. Like the one thing that I've learned over the years is, and just for context, I had 2 kids during being at a startup. We launched a company and I got pregnant a month later. Not anyone should ever go through that kind of hell. But what I've learned along the way is you can absolutely have it all. You just can't always have it all at the same time. And choosing your priorities, just like we're talking about choosing priorities about what's going to make the biggest impact in your company with your projects, choosing the priorities of what's most important. Having a child does not need to be a death sentence to your career, but it does mean that you might want to be realistic of saying, okay, maybe it's going to take me an extra 6 months or a year to get promoted. And I am okay with that right now because I do want a little more flexibility, or I don't want to take on 3 extra projects that I would have done pre-child because I just have all the limitless time. It just means dialing it differently a little bit and being okay with that. Like, again, intentionality in personal life now is just what's most important to you. If it's your family for a period of time, then good for you. I think that's amazing. And it doesn't mean that work doesn't have to still be a massive priority. It just might mean that you're in 6th gear instead of 7th for some period of time to help yourself acclimate.
I just want to draw attention to a project potential of having that kind of conversation that just took place there is an extraordinary benefit to a workforce around all kinds of topics, right? So the role modeling of someone who's been there, done that, there's all kinds of social science around it. But even that is a culture shift project if you begin to have conversations about some of these challenging, career, just the way that we traverse our careers and the ups and downs and arounds.
I will tell you something. We, when we just moved our headquarters space last year, we built a mother's room that candidly is like nicer than any Beacon Hill apartment I've ever seen. I mean, it's like this gorgeous space. And immediately along with that, for the first time ever, we live and die on Slack. And there popped up this new mom channel. And all of a sudden we realized like we had way more new moms than we even realized. And everybody had, you talk to your friends, maybe, if Allison and I are on the same team and we both have little children, we would connect and share stories. But all of a sudden women around our entire globe who were moms with younger kids joined this thing and started sharing stuff that, if the guys ever went into that channel would like their hair would curl because some of the stuff that's discussed. But it's like real and raw and open and just honest, like, how the hell, I have a project due tomorrow. My kid doesn't sleep through the night. How is anyone dealing with this? And it was like the greatest conversation with a set of girlfriends that you could ever have. And you don't go into that channel without saying, holy cow, there's like a lot of women in here who have my back. And there's some strength in numbers. And it was incredibly powerful for women, and people are on it now. Their kids are, my kids are older and I'm on there just because I think it's just empowering to watch these women sort of really helping each other out through a really challenging time in your life.
That's amazing. Peter, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
So I got two questions. Really, so my first one's what about paternity as well? I think, so I work in cybersecurity too, so I got a quick question. We actually use Rapid7 as well too. So I'm lucky enough to have a female as a boss. I only have one female on my sub team, and we're trying to recruit more. So I'd love to hear your ideas and how do you recruit more females in a male-dominant industry? And I also want your opinions about paternity as well. I have 3 kids. So first one came, I took 2 months off. Second kid came, I took another 2 months off. Third kid came, I took 2 months off. And I have a few people that are on my team that are expecting their first kids. And I'm like, well, sign up for your 2 months. And they kind of looked at me like I had like 6 heads because they're like, do you know how busy we are? I'm like, I don't really care. I'm like, go enjoy this or not enjoy this. Depends on your view. So I'd like to hear your opinions on both.
Okay, so I'll start with paternity leave. This is men are gonna hate me with this comment, but like we have a number of men in our company that want the same maternity leave, like the same paternity time equal to what women get. Yeah. The day you guys can give birth, I think you should get the same time, because really it's meant to be about recovery and bonding, whatever. I'm not suggesting men should not bond with their children. Huge fan.
Yeah.
But we're not trying to create parity there yet, at least within our company. That said, we do support men. So we actually, as part of this project, when I said it went way beyond women, it turned out to like what really works for everyone, what creates more inclusion, is we walked away realizing that the 2 weeks of paid paternity leave wasn't nearly enough for the men. And we increased it to a month. And then men are also we have unlimited vacation. So we're finding them getting really creative. With some men are taking that immediate month when their child is born. And then they're taking extended vacations, maybe once their wife goes back to work after a couple of months, and then they can be home with the child or whatever. So we've created a much more flexible situation while increasing it for men at the company. In terms of attracting other women to your organization, I think through the whole process, right? I think for lots of companies, they're now saying, oh, we need to be more diverse. We're going to cast a wider net as we try to recruit people. But if you're a woman or a person of color or anyone who's different from a team, and say I'm coming to interview on your team and it's all white guys, and I'm a little unsure of myself about whether or not I'd want to join a team that everybody looks different than me. Think about who you're having that person interview with. So maybe you're really upfront and saying, hey, we really want to try to we're committed to diversity on this team. And we're going to, we want to work with you to help cast a wider net. Maybe have them meet somebody that you work with cross-functionally who's a woman, or someone that, we've tried to be really thoughtful about not just getting people attracted to the company, but once they walk in, do they see themselves here, and being really thoughtful about the groups of people that they get to meet, what diversity really looks like. We're really honest about our intentions. Cybersecurity is so incredibly white male dominated that for a lot of the firsts, the first people of color or the first women that were getting hired onto this team, we were just really open about, this is where we're at, this is where we're trying to go, we need your help, and this is where we're going. And we were so honest about it, and I think people have seen us create true inclusion, that it's worked well. I love the fact that our company had 4 transgender people on one of our engineering teams before I ever knew about it. And what I mean by that is, it was so not a big deal. We created such an environment of inclusion where people just felt like they could be whoever they were on that team. No one cared. I love that. Like, that to me is then success. So I think just being intentional and thoughtful about it, and then creating and then living up to it. Don't just say it, live it.
Thank you.
And
Sure.
a few things that I'll add really quickly before I'll go to you, Shannon, is around paternity leave. I think a lot of times women are taking their cues from men about whether it's actually safe to take leave. And so I think the fact that you took leave is amazing. And insofar as we're in a position to encourage men to take paternity leave as well as women, I think that actually makes a really big difference. And there have been some significant studies out of like Denmark where they get 1 year of paid leave that men are mostly not taking their 1 leave. And that is creating these huge disparities then, both in terms of women feeling like they're able to, but also then women on average are 1 year behind in their career as compared to men who start at the same time. So there's all these things, all these kind of cascade effects. So I think that that's really meaningful.
I agree. I would also say the more senior the man taking the longer the leave, the better it is for everybody, because it sets a tone. To see people taking that time, or to see a leader taking time to say, hey, I think this is really important. If I'm a woman working on your team, Peter, and I see you've just taken 3 months to really focus on your family, that gives me so much more confidence about my ability to do that. It just sets a great leadership tone.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, Shannon, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, turning on my camera. Hi, Christina. I don't know if you remember me from Shamit.
I'm
over
feeling
20 years ago.
all these great Shamit things, but yeah, I love Shamit. That was one of the best consulting projects I ever had.
Ah, nice to see you. Thank you for sharing what's been going on at Rapid7. So we've been working on DEI for a long, long time, and really in earnest over the past 4 years. We've consulted with Deloitte, and we've been doing some really cool work. We appointed one of our high potential white male leaders to head up our diversity leadership council so that he could help influence the majority. And, you know, and that has gone well. We've since added more to the Diversity Leadership Council. And, you know, so we're working at getting more women in operations up in the higher levels of the organization. And my question is on this idea of an inclusive environment. How have you been able to build that skill set and just bring a general awareness to the folks who, in our case, make the decisions about the people and promotions and pay, and where, you know, it's kind of the unconscious bias thing is just so real in our organization, and I'm sure everywhere else. And we're feeling like there needs to be a steady stream of opportunities to learn in a way that's different than we've ever done it before.
Yep.
And so I'm just curious as to how you've thought about this as you've tried to shift your culture to make it more inclusive.
If I can, I'll use Shamit actually as an example for a minute. You know, I did consulting work there literally like 20 something years ago. Awesome company. It was one of the most forward thinking. I'd been all in tech my whole career and never thought I'd go into a construction firm. And yet Jim and Sarah, the CEO at the time, was really forward thinking about culture and people. And I thought, wow, he had said, I want you to do it sapient, you know, what at Shamit. And I thought, wow, that's pretty forward thinking. And yet what I learned was, you know, okay, he was one guy who was really championing this. So I had the champion. And, you know, the work that I do, the people stuff is still, it's like now got traction, but people hate human resources. I mean, I hate human resources largely, right? I mean, I've tried to do it differently my whole career because I think it's, you know, who wants to go to the complaint department or you know, my printer's a resource, a human being is not. So I've been in a very different place with it, but I'm also incredibly comfortable sharing my point of view. And I don't think that we would have made any progress at a company like Shamit, even with Jim supporting the work, if you didn't have somebody who was willing to push the boundaries. And I think sometimes we'll say, hey, we've got this great woman or we've got this great person of color, but somebody's got to be really comfortable. They've got to have a strong enough voice to not let the unconscious bias or any of that stuff get in their way. Like, this is the tough stuff. To move the dial and to move culture and make significant change is not for the weak of heart. And you have to be willing to get a little messy and a little dirty and be a little unpopular sometimes. And, you know, I have pissed off some white men. When I said we're going 50-50 by 2020, I could not imagine that at Rapid7, which is an incredibly inclusive company to start with, that people would push back. And I had a bunch of 25-year-old young men saying, are you going to fire me because I'm white? I'm like, no, moron, I'll fire you because you don't make your number and you suck. I'm not going to fire you because of the color of your skin. And like that, you realize that you're really going to have to like move a rock uphill sometimes to truly make change. But when you do, that's when you know you've done something pretty amazing. So I think it's really picking the right sponsors and if you've picked somebody who's heading up the council and they're a really good voice and champion, talk to them about not just you want a senior voice, but these are the challenges we're facing. This is where we need you to go to bat. Hey, maybe you're about to have a new baby, senior leader guy, go take your paternity leave and lead by example. Like, all of those things count. And I just think you have to be really bold about what you need and what you're asking for and what you aspire to be. And hold yourself accountable to it.
Great. Thank you.
I'm getting a little feisty now. It's clearly.
I like it. I like it.
I know, I think that's a really incredibly inspiring note for us to start to wrap up on. So I think there's a few announcements that we have to make as well, but I would also love for this group to end by typing into the chat window a 1 to 3 word takeaway that you're going to take away from today. And I have a couple that I'm definitely taking away that I'll share in a moment as well. And while I give you a little bit of time to do that, I also want to draw your attention to the fact that you should have all just received an email. I just received an email from Babson with some next steps on work you can start to be doing internally to lay the groundwork for your project. If you did not receive the email, it means you did not yet sign up for Canvas. So let me know and I'll help you get yourself connected to it. And we'll be sending some emails through Canvas periodically throughout the whole program. So we definitely need you on it. So if you didn't get the email, let me know. Or if one of your team members didn't get the email, have them let me know as well. And so I think some of my takeaways from today included thinking about your scope, thinking about your team, both in terms of how you and your team are dividing up the work in terms of the influencers here, and also in terms of how you get sponsor support, and thinking about the impact that you want to have. And knowing that sometimes it might mean you're not always the most popular. So you have to be bold in the actions that you make in order to achieve this broader vision for equity that we're all striving to make. And I see some of the other takeaways that we have is start somewhere. Yes, starting anywhere is okay. Fiery confidence. I love these. And I'm also taking away what a rich resource this cohort is too, that when some folks were asking questions, other folks were having answers and other perspectives to give as well. This is complex and messy. It all matters. Start where you are, do what you can, be ready to take one small step forward at a time. Identify champions. Find the influencers. I think these are great takeaways. Thank you all so much. Thank you especially to Christina for sharing your insight. Please join me in thanking Christina by clicking on reactions and then the clap emoji, which is how we do virtual rounds of applause here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for coming today. Our next time we'll actually be together in person, I think is likely to be September, but we're going to be sending these emails through Canvas between then and now to help you to get started along the way. And we might have something in August. I'll get in touch with you if we do. So thank you all so much and have a great rest of your day.
Take care. Thank you.